Joseph lost his mother when he was young, but he was loved by his father, Jacob. He was sold into Egypt as a servant by his half-brothers, but he became the head of the household of Potiphar, an Egyptian official. Joseph was later accused of attempted rape by Potiphar's wife and imprisoned. While in prison, Pharaoh's chief butler asked Joseph to interpret his dreams. As Joseph interpreted the dream, he asked the butler to remember him and mention him to Pharaoh to secure his release from prison. True to his dream, the butler was released from prison and returned to the palace. But after 2 years, Joseph still hadn't heard from him. It was a dark moment for Joseph, who didn't know how long he would remain in prison. Joseph had met God in a dream and was being transformed into a man of God through deep contemplation. God is always watching us carefully. When we are tired and struggling, God moves on our behalf. Finally, God moved. On 2 separate occasions, Pharaoh had strange dreams. In one, he saw 7 fat cows, and then an ugly thin cow appeared and ate the fat cows. Another time, he dreamed that he saw 7 ripe ears of corn, and then 7 thin ears of corn appeared and devoured the 7 ripe ears of corn. Pharaoh was so worried that he called in the magicians and wise men of Egypt to interpret the dreams, but they were unable to do so. At this point, the chief butler remembered Joseph and told Pharaoh that when he was in prison, there was a Hebrew boy who was very good at interpreting dreams. Pharaoh called for Joseph. Pharaoh asked if he could interpret the dream, and Joseph said, "It is not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace." Pharaoh's dream was one. God was letting Pharaoh know what he was about to do. 7 fat cows and 7 ripe ears of corn represented 7 years of abundance. The 7 ugly thin cows and the 7 thin ears that followed meant 7 years of famine. Joseph spoke like a messenger from God. The reason Pharaoh has dreamed twice is because God has decided this and is in a hurry. And Joseph was quick to offer a solution. Pharaoh should appoint wise and intelligent men to store 1/5 of the output of the 7 years of plenty in each city to prepare for the 7 years of famine. Pharaoh and his subjects were pleased with Joseph's clear interpretation of the dreams. Pharaoh said that Joseph was a man with the Spirit of God. Pharaoh then appointed Joseph as prime minister, a position of great power over Egypt. Joseph also married Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, a high priest of On. But this is where we need to dig a little deeper. Joseph was a lowly servant of Hebrew origin and an accused rapist. Even though Joseph was good at interpreting dreams, the dream hadn't even happened yet, so why had Pharaoh already given him the position of prime minister? On the other hand, for Joseph to become prime minister, he would have needed the tacit consent of the Egyptian priests, who shared power with Pharaoh at the time. Would they agree to Joseph becoming prime minister? Meanwhile, Joseph married Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, a priest of On. In the Bible, On is Hermopolis, a city dedicated to Thoth, the god of wisdom and knowledge. At the time, Egypt was the most advanced and unrivaled country in the world. Hermopolis was home to the best scholars in many fields, including architecture, astronomy, medicine, and law. The priests of On served the god Thoth and were the head of this elite group. Joseph would have been tested on his wisdom and knowledge by this elite group in order to become prime minister. The elite group recognized that Joseph had amazing powers as a man of God, and it appears that the priest of On married his daughter to Joseph. Meanwhile, the Bible clearly records the names of the priest Potiphar and his daughter Asenath. Why did the Bible go into detail about Joseph's marriage to the priest of On's daughter? How did Asenath view God? At the time, Egypt was a polytheistic country. As such, it is likely that Asenath saw God as one powerful deity, and that she followed Joseph's faith and later served only God. Despite Joseph's wife being the daughter of an Egyptian priest, her 2 sons Ephraim and Manasseh inherited 2 of the 12 tribes of Israel. According to Joseph's dream interpretation, there were 7 years of plenty in Egypt and Canaan. Before the famine came, Joseph's wife Asenath gave birth to 2 sons. Joseph named the older son Manasseh. God has made me completely forget all my afflictions and my father's house. We can sense Joseph's longing for home and the hardships he had endured. When his second son Ephraim was born, he said, "God has made me flourish in a land of affliction." Joseph now lived a stable life in Egypt as prime minister. Of course, All of these blessings came from God. This was followed by 7 years of famine. During a severe famine, people bought food with money at first, but when they ran out of money, they started selling their livestock. When they had exhausted all their money and livestock, they said to Joseph, "We have nothing left before the Lord but our bodies and our land." Joseph bought their land and gave it to Pharaoh. Meanwhile, the priests, who were powerful at the time, received their share of the land from Pharaoh and lived in wealth. Joseph distributed the land to the Egyptian people and gave them seeds to cultivate, on the condition that they give 1/5 of the harvest to Pharaoh. But they were grateful to Pharaoh and Joseph. Joseph suffered greatly, but his faith in God and his confidence that things would work out in the end was strong. God knows our trials, and he delivers us in time. Now is the time to keep the faith.